Ray Hadley is, of course, the Hall of Fame broadcaster on Radio 2GB 4BC and stations around the country. Always a pleasure to talk to him every couple of weeks. And let's focus in about what is happening with the Liddell power station. When Liddell and Eraring get taken offline, best part of 20-30% of the entire energy grid goes with it in New South Wales.
Today, we were operating in New South Wales with about 7,800 megawatts, give a few megawatts either here or there. It wasn't all that sunny. There was a bit of sun about, so of course solar would play a role. But wind, which has a total capacity in New South Wales of 2,000 megawatts, contributed to the 7,830 today to the tune of 70 megawatts from the wind, because the wind wasn't blowing at 10 o'clock this morning. So you close down, firstly, Liddell, you close down Eraring, and this is the whole point. No one's arguing about climate change. No one's arguing about whether we need another source of energy in 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years, because coal will eventually run out. There's no doubt we need something else. But in the meantime, if we go by 2030 to getting rid of all these dreadful, horrible coal-fired power stations, we won't be doing this. Well, I won't be anyway. We'll be sitting in the dark in a corner in a cave somewhere, because we won't have any power. And all these sock-wearing, sandalised protesters, they'll similarly be sitting in the dark with a hurricane lamp in a treehouse in Nimbin, maybe, I don't know. But doesn't anyone actually get the fact, as we transition to something else? I mean, when I started in radio 40 years ago, you never heard of a mobile phone or a computer. In the last 4 decades, we've gone in all sorts of directions with communication. I'm sure with energy supply in the next 4 decades, we'll do exactly the same thing. But in the meantime, we've got to stay warm in winter and cool in summer, and we've got to keep making sure manufacture and retail and wholesale and all the other businesses relying on power have some sort of reliable baseload power. And at the moment, we don't have that opportunity.
No, and to underline the point that you're making, when we were moving towards mobile phones, we didn't pull every single fixed phone out of the wall because there was one telephone tower in North Sydney. Slowly but surely, when it ended up replacing the technology that currently existed, you were able to walk away from the landline. Which brings me to the point again today about gas. In the 24 hours in New South Wales, the total amount of gas, which would be the other technology other than coal to keep the lights on, because, as you say, when it doesn't blow and it doesn't shine, 5%. That was New South Wales, 5%. So they're yanking what works for what works on Twitter. But the reality is that we're gonna be left in a hole here, but those who are apparently all in charge say there'll be no blackouts. I'm not entirely sure how this works, but we're all along for the ride.
The analogy you use about phones is a beauty. I mean, we've transitioned. I had 4 fixed phones when I was living in a house at one stage, you know, landlines for broadcast, all that. In a new house, I don't have a landline, except for broadcast, which is now done via, as we're doing now, pinging up in the air, through satellite technology. But you're right.
I know that you're a big fan, like we all are, of Matt Cunningham's work in the Northern Territory. He is the guy who's there for the uncomfortable conversations, the real detail, the normal people, not the sort of advocacy garbage that we see over on government-funded news services that are all about flying people in and out and talking about racism as opposed to what's actually happening. And what about this story that, again, was echoing around last week, where there's a teenager who desperately wants to be with the family that he's always known? Oh, but adoption can't possibly happen when somebody's got an Indigenous connection.
I'm a representative and an ambassador for a group called CARI, an Indigenous group, and they do as best they can to replace disadvantaged Indigenous children with Indigenous families, because someone could be in jail, someone could be, on drugs, someone could be in alcohol-induced, sort of state at the moment, so they've got to put them somewhere, and they try their best. But when they can't, well, they put them with non-Indigenous families, even for a brief time, that are part of the pool of people. Now, we're not talking about stealing children, we're not talking about packing them off, we are talking about a practical solution for disadvantaged children at this stage in the Northern Territory and other areas, where they've got to be looked after. They've got to be looked after. Now, it's been claimed, of course, by Jacinta Price that sometimes these children, even when they're put into the care of Indigenous people, are taken off them and put back into the care of people who've abused them and done all sorts of things. But you talk about Matt doing a good job. Liam Mendez from The Australian, I speak to him regularly. He's up there on assignment at the moment for The Australian, for the newspaper. And he sent a video, which has probably been seen on Sky News. I looked at it over the weekend again this morning. And Anthony Albanese went there fly in, fly out. He wasn't there as long as miners fly in and fly out. He was there for a few hours. And on Thursday night at 11 o'clock, there were kids running the street, according to Liam, and he's got video evidence, which he's put on the Australian website, as young as 10. They look like younger than that to me. They're little tiny kids. And Anthony Albanese stands up there today in Tasmania with Pat Farmer going on his run on The Voice, telling the world that everything's okay, there's no problems in Alice Springs. Now, he says, oh, you know, The Voice, real hardcore Indigenous people want The Voice. Well, go to Alice Springs and for more than 5 hours, Prime Minister, and talk to the people in businesses on the ground about the basket case that is Alice Springs. I mean, even Labor MP Marion Scrymgour are saying today, we've got to change it. Things have got to change. She's calling for change. And the best he can do, the Prime Minister said, well, I respect her. I'm going to have a talk to her very soon about what she wants. And she wants the equivalent of the cash card. She wants people to be able to make sure they feed their children, make sure they keep medical appointments, make sure they look after themselves and their family. That's what she's about. And the Prime Minister's pretending it's because he's so enraptured by The Voice. Well, it doesn't suit his narrative to say, well, hang on, aside from The Voice, we do have a problem in the Northern Territory. And we do have a problem in southwestern Sydney. And we do have a problem in regional parts of Queensland, and shock horror, even in Logan we have a problem with Indigenous kids and other kids misbehaving. But no, it has to be about The Voice, and the narrative doesn't change because he won't admit to the problems that Indigenous Australians are facing right now in Alice Springs, and we need to solve that problem on behalf of everyone in Alice Springs, no matter what their colour may be.
But what about the hit job that's coming from Darwin from the Labor Party? The government saying, oh, Peter Dutton's a dog act for turning up. Oh, it's Jacinta Price needs to automatically report everything that she's heard. Talk about distraction from what we can all see with our own eyes and hear with our own ears.
I've been covering these sort of events for a long time. I've never heard a Minister of the Crown in any capacity, state, territory or federal, refer to another politician in the way she referred to Peter Dutton in saying it's a dog act. Now, it's not the sort of language that you'd want your children to be talking about, you know, someone in a position of authority. And for a police minister to use that expression tells me more about her than it tells me about Peter Dutton. And I think she has shown that perhaps she's been elevated beyond her station in life because she acted with no dignity, no class when she made that comment. She could have made the comment and made it very, very, you know, fervently, but she didn't have to resort to that sort of language of the Leader of the Opposition. It was just disgraceful.